Oh, hey! I'm glad you're here. Welcome to VHS, where we look at movies by way of the jobs portrayed within them and hopefully learn a little bit about both. I'm your host, Dirk Marshall, and we've had some change ups lately, and I wanted to take a moment to address them. I began this podcast with Wade Allen. Rivet heads will remember him from his 90s industrial band Christ Analog. Check out Surface Like Nerve and Cold Magnetic Sun if you want to know what 90s Dirk was listening to as he threaded phone cords through his Doc Martens. True story. He was our editor slash producer, and then he passed the torch to my friend JL, who really shaped VHS into what it's been for the past 7.5 seasons. Alas, his successful job and awesome family needed his attention too, so the next few episodes, there are different talented people at work behind the scenes. There may be some changes, but bear with us as we try out new things, and hopefully, at the end of this season, we'll have a concrete new member of VHS. Either way, we have 8 movies to celebrate and 8 wonderful guests to hear from, so let's get right to it. No, that's not a good segue. Gosh, I want to segue, but my brain is fighting it. No, not good. Well, regardless, this is a great guest to kick us off. There it is. Okay, I landed the plane. The film is Chok Dee, the guest is a professional kickboxer, and this is VHS. Hello and welcome to VHS, the podcast where each episode is about a film and the guests have the professional experiences portrayed in the film. I'm your host, Dirk Marshall, and you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at VHUS_podcast. And please do, as I love to hear your thoughts and experiences with the films in these professions. For this episode, I'm joined by Elijah Taylor, who's a former professional kickboxer. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
People can find you on Twitter at Elijah_pizza, correct?
That is correct.
All right. As well as you're the co-host of the Kicking and Screaming podcast. Could you tell us a little bit about why I said podcast? No, please tell us about the podcast Kicking and Screaming.
Well, if I had to guess, you probably said it that way because you maybe had like an air bubble in your throat or something.
Yep, you're right. You're
Nice.
also a doctor.
Wonderful. No, the Kicking and Screaming podcast is a genre film podcast. I suppose not dissimilar to this one, although I think that we have a slightly weaker premise than your premise, but ours is still pretty strong. We basically alternate challenging each other with a horror or martial arts movie, and the other person has to pair a film from the other genre with it to create a genre film double feature, basically with the intent of exposing folks who might enjoy one genre but haven't really checked out the other to more films, and also to have pretext to make my wife watch a bunch of kung fu movies and talk about them.
Yeah, I love it. I heard about it, I think, when Vanessa was on Doug Loves Movies, perhaps.
Oh, yeah.
And then
That's
I was
right,
like,
she's on
oh,
there with Joe Lynch.
yeah, I was like, I got to check this out. And I think it's a fantastic premise. And when I told my producer JL about it, he was like, that's genius. It's such a smart, like kicking and screaming and the pairing of the horror and the action.
That's
I love it.
that's what I said when I discovered the premise of your podcast. I was like, that's genius.
Yeah, well, thank you. I wish there's more people that said that out loud. We're brought together, though, by the film Chok Dee from 2005. Was this a first watch for you?
This was actually. I had no idea that this movie existed until you suggested it.
Oh, that's a huge compliment. Thank you very much. I actually really searched for something for this conversation, and I chose this film based solely on us having this conversation that we're about to have. There are films that utilize Muay Thai, if I'm saying that correctly, Muay Thai.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thai,
great.
that's correct.
To incredible degrees. And I looked at all those movies and I was like, oh man, this is my chance to talk about these movies. But then it's not really about me. And so we will at some point in the episode, I'll ask you about maybe 3 favorites in the Muay Thai sort of action films. But that'll happen later. So stay tuned. The synopsis of this film is: released from prison, a talented kickboxer, Dida, tries to gain access to professional competitions. However, on IMDb, if you looked.
Yes, thank you for calling this out, because I was like, that is not the synopsis that I read.
No, on IMDb it says, featuring Master Seiksan Jinjara, this DVD shows special training drills that you can use to develop balance, endurance, and so much more. It's unbelievable. After watching this DVD, Fighting Spirit magazine said, it goes on for like a huge long paragraph.
Yeah.
And then at the bottom of this page, it says, hey, does anybody have a synopsis for this movie? And I'm like, this is what you put. I don't understand what's happening.
I will say, after having watched Chok Dee, I do feel like my balance has improved.
Oh, good,
So,
good.
there may be something to that. I don't know. Hard to say.
I mean, I've seen it about 3 times now, and I have not fallen over since.
There you go.
There it is.
All right.
That's good to know. At the time of this recording, you could rent it at your local video store like Movie Madness here in Portland, Oregon. Support your local video stores. You can buy the DVD or you can stream it, I think, on YouTube. Is that where you found it?
Yes, I found it on YouTube.
Awesome. Let's take a look at who's involved. Our director is Xavier Duringer, who did Sidestroke in '93, a lot of TV movies, and 2019's Paradise Beach, which involves a heist, and Thailand. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm going to check it out.
All right.
Our writers, there's a few, but it's based on Dida's book about his own life. I have not read the book. It's actually pretty hard to find. And I believe in French. The editor is Raphael Urton, who did a ton of shorts and TV movies, and Rogue City, which is a 2020 gritty crime movie, which I haven't seen yet, but again, on the list. Cinematographer is a name I do not know how to pronounce, Guillaume Schiffman, I think. But get this, he's the cinematographer for The Artist, the big 2011.
Oh.
Yeah, OSS 117 Lost in Rio, and a ton of other things. So I love it when somebody who's like won Oscars and things is tied to this like 2005 French like biopic, essentially. Actors, we have Dida Diafat, Dida. I mean, now I'm questioning myself.
I think it's Dida.
Dida. Okay, Dida.
I think. I'm basing this. I don't know, like 100%. I'm not confident, but I'm basing it on a vague memory of watching his fight, his second fight with like Ramon Deckers, and trying to remember how the commentators said it, and I think it was Dida.
Okay, I watched a couple fights on YouTube, and again I was like, it's hard to say. I'm probably going to say it wrong either way, but he did Legionnaire in '98 with Jean-Claude Van Damme.
That's right. That was the prison movie, right?
Yeah, and then he did Chok Dee, which is not a porn. He did Mutants as well, and then that's pretty much it. Then we have Bernard Giraudoux. Again, sorry all French people for those pronunciations. 86 credits, all very French. Sadly, he passed away in 2010. Florence Favre is the last person who did Chok Dee, Elephant King, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and the Expanse TV show. She's the love interest in this movie.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So let's press play on Chok Dee. We start with Dida in a hoodie and jacket in the city. He meets up with his buddy, and they break into a truck and are quickly arrested. Like, so fast.
Like, very quickly.
So quickly.
This is the first thing that I want to jump in with. When you were going down the list of like the people involved, when you got to the editor, I was like, I have a problem with him.
Oh yeah.
I reject his work. I felt like most of the movie I'm like super into. The editing is bizarre.
Yes.
And the way it just kind of moves from thing to thing, like it feels like every couple of scenes there's just a piece missing. And I don't know if there's just stuff that like, was deemed unusable once they like got to the editing bay. But yeah, there's a few really abrupt cuts in this movie. That's the first of, I think, many.
Yeah, it's also interesting that there's just no music for a long stretch in the beginning of this film.
Yeah.
Until he has like headphones on, I think, is when they introduce this. So they introduce it like we're hearing what he's hearing.
Yeah, there's a word for that where the music is
diegetic or
diegetic. Yeah. Is that all of the music that's in the movie? Is it all diegetic?
No,
and I just didn't notice it.
There's a couple training parts and where he's sweeping and things where it's the same song playing.
Right.
So maybe they just budget-wise only had like that song in the end credits. I'm not sure really.
So.
But yeah, he goes straight to jail very quickly in the credits. And in jail, he seems to know everybody, so you don't have to worry about him while he's in jail. Time passes as he's in solitary confinement because he attacks a dude after he knocks over some wood. And then the guards say, we put you in with some good men, which is either something you do or don't want to hear in prison. I don't know, really. Could go either way. But it's two old men. They talk about fighting, and they say he's married, which we know is shit because of Napoleon and Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure says it when he's in the bowling alley. So
It's true.
Yeah, and then the old guy elbows him in the face. And speaking of elbows, you're very good with them. Last night, I
Oh.
watched a video of you fighting, and the second you started throwing elbows, I was like, yeah, get him.
Thank you. I appreciate that. No, I think that fight in particular, I was more motivated than usual to use elbows because is it okay if I just go off on a
Yeah,
fighting tangent
please.
really quick? Okay.
Absolutely. As
To
many.
completely derail the
That's what we
synopsis of
do.
the film.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So that fight, I had been out of. It had been a while since I had fought because I had to like leave the country for a bit, clear up some visa stuff, and then ended up having to like go back to the States for a brief period and come back. So I was like a few months out of practice, and usually when you're fighting in Isan, like you fight really regularly. So had a little bit of rust and felt like, all right, it's going to take a bit to get into it. But they were like, this guy, this guy's fine. He hasn't really fought a lot. He's big, but he doesn't have a lot of skill. He doesn't have, he doesn't have a lot of cardio, and he doesn't have a lot of technique. So like, it's an easy fight. And I was like, cool, easy fight. We're at this little festival, should be just like having fun, basically. And Muay Thai, like traditional Muay Thai rules, you fight 5 rounds. And 5 rounds is a long time to be fighting. So essentially, across like most of Thailand, and obviously there are exceptions if it's maybe like a championship fight or you've got some particular grudge or whatever. But the general vibe is that knowing that you're going to have to fight a 5-round fight, the first 2 rounds you both kind of take it easy because you can't come out just throw and knock out haymakers and try to keep up that pace for 5 rounds. Like almost nobody has the conditioning to maintain like a high level of striking for that long. So you spend 2 rounds kind of checking, like gauging the pace, feeling each other out. And I've had trainers and coaches tell me judges don't score the first 2. Like scoring starts in the 3rd round, and that's not entirely true, but that's how the first 2 rounds are viewed. That it's like judges like don't even usually pay attention to the first 2 rounds. And so I go in having not fought in a while, expecting that, like, all right, gonna get 2 rounds to kind of shake the rust off, and pick up the pace in the 3rd round is usually what I do. Most folks do. This guy, I guess, being a bit bigger than me and knowing that he didn't have the cardio to fight 5 rounds was like, if I don't knock him out in the first 30 seconds, I'm not going to win. So we go into it with like very different mentalities. And this guy, like the bell rings, he comes at me like a bull. And I'm still just kind of like, yeah, all right, feeling it out. He charges forward and immediately just throws like 5 or 6 really hard right elbows in a row. And they even like kind of reference it in this movie. They talk about like not throwing elbows in the first few rounds. And yeah, that's a thing that I, had been told as well. Like, yeah, like, you're not trying to like cut a guy or knock him out in the first few rounds. And a lot of the time, if you're Fanang, like a foreign fighter, or if they know that you're not super experienced, if you don't throw elbows, they usually won't, because elbows are like the most likely to like knock you out, cut you, like cause a, more serious injury. Like elbows are a pretty nasty shot, that's why they're not allowed in like European and Western kickboxing. So yeah, a lot of the time it's like, yeah, if you don't throw an elbow first, a lot of the more experienced Thai fighters like will not throw an elbow at you. But yeah, he charged forward, threw a bunch of elbows, immediately split me open. After the fight, I had to get like 6 stitches. But yeah, I had a nasty gash over my eye. And it was funny because like we clinched up, and I'm just like kind of holding him because I was honestly like almost knocked out in the first, like after the second elbow, like everything just kind of went white. So I just grabbed him, held on until I could like, regain lucidity. The ref breaks us up and I see blood all over his face and realize it must be my blood and just started laughing. And the ref like looks at it and is telling me like I might have to stop it. And I'm like, no, mai penrai, neat no. It's like, it's okay, it's small, it's okay. And he looks at it and he's like, it's not small. And I'm like, it's fine. So he basically tells me like, all right, I'll give you 1 more round. We'll see how you're doing. And, round goes by and I try to like prove that I'm doing okay. Go back to my corner and my trainer's like, they're gonna stop the fight. You're bleeding too much and you're not like showing them enough. So they're like, you have to like come out swinging. Like you have to hurt this guy and prove that you're like in this fight. So then, knowing that, and basically like knowing that the guy wasn't that good at fighting but might win because I got cut, I was like, absolutely not. I'm going to cut up his whole face. And so I threw as many elbows as I have in a fight. Essentially, I was just trying to cut him the whole time. And I don't think that I successfully cut him, but I did knock out his mouth guard at one point, and the ref didn't notice, because usually if they see it, the ref will like stop the fight and make sure they put their mouth guard back in. The ref didn't notice, so I kept just jabbing him in the mouth, and his mouth kind of filled up with blood, which was very satisfying. I just kept being like, ha, your mouth is bleeding. And then, I did win that fight. And then afterwards, a kid ran up and took a picture of the cut and showed it to me. And I was like, ooh, that's gross. It was a bit bad.
I was wondering if they had to like tape it or something, or do they just call it if they're not allowed to do that? Or
right, they kind of cake it with Vaseline between rounds. They just like jam like gobs of Vaseline on it to try to stop up some of the bleeding. But yeah, it was just pouring blood the whole time, because especially cuts on your forehead, they just bleed so much, like right above your eyes. But yeah, then afterwards, this clearly inebriated dude was like the fight doctor, because we're in like a very rural part of Thailand, fighting a funeral, and the guy starts stitching me up, and my trainer comes up and starts like speaking to him in Thai, and I don't like understand the word that she says, and then she laughs and she's like, he's a veterinarian. Nice. And I was like, nice.
That's excellent. Just to back it up for anybody that's listening, it was a fight at a funeral?
Yes, it was a fight at a funeral, which is
a common thing?
It's pretty common over there. Yeah, at least
we should have that here.
We absolutely should. I demand fights at my funeral.
Yeah.
No, that part of Thailand, at least the region that I fought in, is kind of like the northeastern part of Thailand, and it's called the Isan region. It's where most of the rice crops are exported from. It's a lot of like farm country, and is one of the more impoverished regions of Thailand. So it's like a very different vibe than Bangkok, for example.
Yeah.
But yeah, so funerals out there at least, and I don't know if this is the case across all of Thailand, but they're like a very big event. It usually like lasts a few days. There's like feasts. People ordain as monks. They have, I've been to funerals where they had like karaoke, and so yeah, usually it's like kind of a small festival, which I think is very cool. And yeah, fights during funerals are not uncommon, and they actually at that one cremated the body during our fight, which was cool, because like between rounds I would look over and like see the smoke and stuff. Yeah, it was kind of a trip.
That's cool. They should combine the karaoke and the fighting, so it's like a punk show.
Oh, that's very fun.
Yeah.
See, I feel like now we're just planning like the perfect funeral.
Right. And I know you like to get punched by celebrity fighters, I guess I would say. I don't know, actors. But do you, once you die, do you want them to line up and punch your corpse?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess I'm imagining that I'll be cremated because it's like the cheapest thing, and so I'm not imagining like a funeral with like the coffin and the body and everything.
Wait, I've got it. You know how in the action films they dust up, so when they impact each other you see the like cloud?
Yes,
let's have them all dust up with your corpse, and that's the fight, right?
That's perfect. Okay. Yeah, that's the dream.
Okay, let's get that Kickstarter going. Sign up for the Patreon at Kicking and Screaming. Let's get Elijah turned into ash and spread on the knuckles of Dolph Lundgren, if we can.
As soon as possible.
As soon as possible. Didn't you get married this year?
Yeah.
So maybe a couple more years.
Yeah. Give me a couple of years.
Okay. Everyone in the jail's wearing their own clothes, which I think is so weird. I don't understand how this works. Like,
right, yeah.
They're all just wearing street clothes. They don't even seem like they're bugged by the fact that they're in prison. It's so weird.
No, and I remember a scene where they're like having dinner and they have like a cabinet full of spices.
Yeah.
Like, they've got like a pretty good setup.
It's not bad at all. His grandma visits and he says that she'll not have to cry anymore, and he'll take care of her so she doesn't have to clean crap up, which is a sweet gesture. This is a very true part of Dida's life. I sent you a clip of the interview. I don't know if you saw, where he was talking about his grandmother and how he missed out on being raised by his parents. And so he kind of gets a little emotional in that scene. It's a nice little touchstone for both the interview and in the film, I think.
Yeah.
The older gentleman tells Dida about a training camp in Thailand and that he must learn patience. This feels like his introduction to Muay Thai fighting, but what was yours?
Oh man, honestly, I feel like a lot of people in the West, my like true introduction to it, because I had watched like mixed martial arts and stuff. My family had been really into boxing, and then the early days of the UFC and just a lot of martial arts movies. So I mean, I guess like the first time I saw it portrayed probably would have been a kickboxer with Jean-Claude Van Damme, because he goes to Thailand and trains and does the whole thing.
Right.
But that one like didn't really stick with me. I think the way it's presented in Kickboxer is a trap that I think a lot of Western martial arts films fall into, where it's presented as this sort of quasi mystical thing, like his training is this old man who does like these bizarre, like ties his legs to things and stretches them out, and
Yeah.
it didn't really land with young Elijah as being like anything real. It was no
Sure.
more like real in my head than like anything that's practiced in like a Shaw Brothers movie. So I think that probably would have been like my first exposure. But the first time that I was like, yo, Muay Thai is cool, was probably Ong Bak,
Yeah.
which I think is true for a
Same.
lot of people. Yeah, I saw Ong Bak and I was like, yo, I think I want to learn this. And then being into like professional fighting, there were fighters who were like big practitioners of Muay Thai. Anderson Silva was a big one back in the day. Mauricio Shogun Hua was like a very good like clinch fighter. But yeah, I think Ong Bak was the one where I was like, this is cool. I should do Muay Thai.
Yeah. What is a clinch fighter?
So the clinch is a very important part of Muay Thai, and it's something that you definitely still see in like UFC and mixed martial arts, but not nearly to the same extent that you do in Muay Thai, because when you have a mixed martial arts rule set, or even just like a street fight, there's more grappling in general. It's less
Mm-hmm.
regulated, so if you're holding on to someone, they can try to pull you down to the ground, and it becomes a different fight. So you don't see as many like UFC fighters really work in the clinch. But the clinch is essentially when two standing fighters are wrapped up, basically kind of grappling with each other. And the goal in a clinch is to control your opponent's head. You want to kind of overlap your hands on the back of their head and turn their head forward, like tilt their head down, so that they're just kind of looking at the ground, their own feet. And basically, once you're controlling their head, you can control the rest of their body. So if they don't know how to fight in a clinch, and they don't know how to like get out of this position or how to do anything there, it's an extremely vulnerable position to be in. When someone is pulling your head forward and blocking your shoulders with, or like when you're clinching someone, your forearms are kind of driving into their collarbones, and a lot of the force of a punch, say, or even an elbow, comes from the rotation of your body. So if someone is blocking your shoulders at the collarbone from rotating, you can't really get any force into your punches. So it's super dominant position, especially if you know how to like maneuver someone in the clinch. You can sweep them off their feet, throw them to the ground, topple them over, which you definitely see in this movie a lot. But a lot of fighting the clinch in Muay Thai is holding them in the clinch and throwing knees and elbows, because they're pretty damaging, like close range strikes. And so I kind of gravitated towards clinch fighting when I was fighting. I had trained some judo and Brazilian jiu-jitsu previously, which is all grappling and kind of grabbing, wrestling type stuff. And it felt kind of natural transitioning into the clinch. I also am like taller than a lot of the guys that were in my weight class. I fought a lot of guys who were shorter but more muscular. I'm kind of like tall and lean, which meant that I kind of had an advantage throwing knees, because it was easier for me to like pull their head down and knee them in the face, or even knee kind of like up high, like on the body, or like into the liver and stuff. So I sort of gravitated towards that. I think it was my third fight. I actually broke two of the guys' ribs throwing a knee in the clinch. And it was great because it was like 30 seconds into the first round, and he was like the odds-on favorite. Everyone was expecting him to win that fight, myself included. I was like, he's probably going to win. He looks really strong. And yeah, he wasn't very good in the clinch. He was like a heavy hitter. He had like a strong right kick and a strong right punch. And yeah, he like threw a high kick a couple of times. And, you know, I was like, oh man, yeah, if he kicks me in the face, I'm done. But I got him in the clinch. He didn't really know what to do, kneed him in the ribs, and he just crumpled. I was like waiting for him to get back up, and he was like, nope, I'm done.
Whoa.
So yeah, that was cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I forget what the initial question was. I went on a long tangent there.
Oh, that was great. No, I asked about the clinch and you walked me through it. So thank you.
Nice.
Yeah, because I've never heard that term. I've heard of grappling.
Right.
And I've heard of scrapple, which I think is a breakfast thing.
It is. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, but I hadn't heard of clinch. So that's great. We messaged previously about that we both found something in very different ways. I saw fighting and something like Ong Bak and was like, those people definitely died. Like the fighting is so crazy that I would go somewhere else. And you saw it and were like, I'm going to go towards that. And I think that's fascinating. For me, improv is the thing that sort of forced me to be present in a moment and not be picking myself apart and being, you know, it's like it keeps me away from any of those sort of negative doubting things, because it's like you just can't be, you have to be in that moment. And you were like, yeah, that's what fighting was for me. And I thought that that's pretty amazing.
No, it very much was that. And that was honestly not, you know, I think with anything that you sort of discovered that way, it was not the intention going into it, which I'm sure was the same with improv. Just something that you kind of like find once you're doing it. But yeah, I mean, basically my entire life have been a deeply anxious person and have lived with mental illness that runs in my family, bipolar 2, and, you know, was not diagnosed until, I mean, honestly, just a few years ago. So there were long stretches of like chemical depression without me really understanding why that was happening. And yeah, I definitely didn't turn to fighting, you know, thinking like, oh yeah, this is gonna, you know, make my brain better. I just grew up watching a lot of martial arts movies and thought it was cool. So yeah, and I think that, you know, seeing something like Ong Bak and being like, yeah, I want to like go towards that was a combination of, I think, growing up watching so many like kung fu movies where like the training montages are these really like agonizing things, but then they become unbeatable. So I'm like, yeah, of course, that's what you have to do. You have to get beaten up a lot. But I think also just being at a point in my life where I sort of didn't have anything to lose, I guess, because I didn't necessarily value, you know, my body or anything that I had in my life at the time. So it was just kind of like, yeah, like, you know, let's go to a strange country where I don't speak the language at all and try to fight people for money and see if that works out. Because
it's amazing.
Yeah, it was a very like, you know, the worst case scenario was still not that alarming to me because again, I didn't, you know, necessarily have like a lot of self-preservation instinct at that point. And yeah,
you also rack up less student debt that way.
Oh yeah, 100%. High school dropout, and I would not have it any other way.
Yeah, that's genius. Well, a guard lets them spar in a hallway, and he's very sloppy, so he's training. We get the first music in the film at this moment. Then there's a scene where he's learning English verb conjugation. It's just one brief, like 1 minute, and he's like, he says 3 words, I think, in the 3 different tenses, and then it just moves on to bag training. And so I was like, well, that's odd.
Okay, I watched the version that I found on YouTube was an English dub.
Oh,
and so
weird.
At that scene, I think in the dub he is learning Thai, and I was like, that makes sense. He's learning Thai for when he goes over to Thailand, but then he never really uses it.
Yeah, I have the DVD, and it's he's practicing English.
Okay, that makes more sense, I guess, given
Does
that
it though? Because I think Thai would make more sense. That's the thing where I was like, what is happening?
Narratively, it would make far more sense for him to be learning Thai at that moment. But then when he gets there and does not speak a word of Thai, I was like, what were you doing with your little book, man?
Okay, yeah, that must be why he's speaking English. Because I also was like, why is everyone speaking in English to him too? Like that's
right.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I will say like the level of English fluency in Thailand is pretty low across the board. And in Bangkok, you're going to see like higher rates of it. But even that is more common among like younger generations, so like people kind of like in their 20s right now, you might find more like English speaking, but Dida was there in like the early 90s, and I think early 90s Thailand, he would not have found nearly as much English as he does in this movie.
That makes sense. That totally makes sense. From inside a satin pillow, the old man produces a cape and tells him of the Mecca of Muay Thai. Have you been to the Mecca of Muay Thai?
So you were referring to the gym that he goes to, right?
Oh, that's the gym. Yeah,
I think that's what he refers to as the Mecca of Muay Thai. Is a gym called Luk Ban Yai. Luk Ban Yai is, or was at least, I actually don't know if they're still around, but they were, definitely a real gym in Bangkok that I assume Dida actually trained at, because it would be weird if they changed that for the movie. So I would imagine that he did come from Luk Ban Yai. And I know they like definitely produced a few, notable fighters. And I think there was a period of time in the 90s where they were kind of just a fighter factory, which like a term that you'll hear for gyms, because gyms have different focuses. There are gyms, especially in Thailand, that are geared towards, tourists who want to like learn about Muay Thai. So like, you'll get a lot of businessmen on holiday that are like, this is fun. There are gyms that are geared towards fitness and, like self-growth, and, you want to like get your cardio up and do like a fun aerobic program, but you never spar and like don't want to fight. And then there are gyms that, you'll hear this like fighter factory, and it's like, that's what they do. They produce fighters at a high level. If you go there, you either become like a high level professional fighter or you stop going there. There's no middle ground. They just churn out like champions. And I think there was a period of time when Luk Ban Yai was kind of like a notable gym for that. And what I know of them is that one of their coaches back in the day was a former like Western boxing champion. He fought like the WBC. And so they had a pretty high focus on boxing, like punches, essentially, which is not always the case in Muay Thai. Like a lot of gyms actually, even to this day, like a lot of Thai gyms neglect boxing. They focus on kicks, clinch fighting, elbows, knees, and they don't have great hands. And so I think, especially at that time, a gym that was like very high level boxing was like, would have been a very strong gym. There wouldn't have been a lot of other Thai gyms that were like producing fighters that could compete with that. One of Dida's most like famous, noteworthy, I think, wins is that he beat Ramon Dekkers twice, which Ramon Dekkers is like one of the most famous kickboxers of all time. And he had a rivalry with Thai fighter named Koban, who Koban is like widely regarded as one of the greatest Muay Thai fighters in history. Like Koban is a legend. To this day, he trains with like very high level fighters like John Jones, who was the UFC light heavyweight champion, had like an undefeated career. Koban was like his main like striking trainer. And so, yeah, Koban, legendary dude. Ramon Dekkers had this very famous rivalry with him back in the day where they had 4 fights, and I know they both like won some and lost some. So Ramon was like very famous for like, yo, he beat like this legendary Thai champion. He's like, Ramon Dekkers is like one of the best in the world. And Dida beat him twice. So like very, gym that was producing high level fighters for sure. And I think the thing that Dekkers kind of brought to Muay Thai at like this very high level at this stage that he was on with Koban was that his hands were better. Like his Western boxing was better than Koban. And that was this kind of turning point where a lot of like Thai gyms started to notice and be like, oh, we can't neglect boxing. Like, these Falang, these Europeans are like coming over and outboxing us. We need to work on that. And so I think Luk Ban Yai was one of the like early gyms that was like up there in that. But to answer your question, I have not been to Luk Ban Yai. And I don't know that it would still be considered the Mecca of Muay Thai. I feel like that's maybe a misnomer.
Probably so. We next get a montage of prison science, and then they give him a tattoo that reads Chok Dee. So if you're playing at home, shots, because the name is in the movie. Only he doesn't tell Dida what he's tattooing, which is a very white person thing to do, to get a cool looking tattoo that you don't know what it says. So he's lucky that he doesn't later find out it says ass pony baloney, because that's a terrible fight name.
It would be. Yeah. It would be a rough one.
The old APB. The old man gives him a book to give to his daughter once he arrives in Thailand. He visits his grandma and she gives him money to go, and another sweet little moment between the two of them. Then, when he arrives in Thailand, he has a cab ride, and the cab driver hands him a brochure of Thai women.
Yeah, that
But that doesn't go anywhere. So I was just like, what is happening here? Is this a thing?
yeah, and it definitely is.
Oh,
And there are details like that that feel to me like they're included because they were things that
he
Dida
remembers.
remembers and
Yeah.
wrote in his book, I'm sure. But obviously, yeah, it does not necessarily pay
It's not a
off in the
plot point.
story.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is something that they kind of hint at when he shows up to the Banyai because they don't want to let him in.
Oh, right.
And it's because, especially at that time, and this is still a huge fucking problem to this day, but a lot of visiting foreign men who are in Thailand are there for sex tourism because prostitution is legal there and because it is in large areas. Obviously there's a substantial difference in the exchange rate, so the American dollar goes pretty far over there, so someone who would be like middle class in the United States can live pretty large in Thailand. And there are, I mean, it is a huge thing that there's sex tourism and sex pads is what they're called.
Sex pads?
Sex pads, yeah.
Oh,
Uh,
sex pats.
Sex pad, yeah. So like an
Got it.
expat, expatriate, but yeah,
Got it.
they move there, essentially retired, but they go there specifically for the red light districts and
Mm.
sex work kind of culture because they can effectively buy a woman for what is to them very cheap. And
Wow.
so that's a really common thing, and especially in the early 90s it would have been even more so because like now when you go there and you're like, I want to fight, most gyms, there are still gyms that are like Thai only, but most gyms are like, yeah, I'm sure you do, that's cool. But this was before the
Mm-hmm.
popularity and ubiquity of like UFC and kickboxing in the West, obviously before Ong Bak. So there were not a ton of European and Americans going to Thailand to learn Muay Thai. And so most of the time, if you saw a guy like that over there, you assume that he's there for sex tourism because like he's not there for business, he doesn't have any kind of trade here.
Right.
And yeah, this was before Westerners coming over to kickbox was as common as it is now. So yeah, that's they don't really like. I thought it was interesting. They don't make it like a big plot point, but it's one of
Yeah.
those things that like feels very like real and authentic to what his story would have been. And it's something where like if you've been there and like kind of lived that experience, you're like, oh yeah, they thought he was this. Because yeah, that was the thing. Like I made a point of not even like dating in Thailand at
Mm-hmm.
all because
You were a
the
no sex tourist.
I was absolutely, and it was I was there to fight, I was there to work, but also like even if I'm like at a bar and like a woman is being flirtatious, whatever, I would shut it down so quickly because the kind of politics and dynamics of that culturally are just not something that I wanted to get into. It
That's
was
great.
yeah, I knew a lot of guys who would go over there and be like, yeah, I met this girl, I was just coming out for a holiday, but I met this girl at a bar. We really hit it off, and I think I'm going to stay. And what would end up happening is they are like, wow, this girl fell in love with me very quickly, and the girl's like, this rich American is going to buy my family a house,
Mm.
and it's just like exploitative in different ways, and like just no,
Yeah.
it's like it never goes well.
It
So
doesn't. It doesn't sound great for anyone involved.
right, yeah, so I was very much just like, no thank you, I'm here to fight.
Yeah. Well, then he arrives at the gym and it's closed, so he sleeps outside, and this goes on for like 4 days. And then he catches two guys trying to steal a bike, and he fends them off, and someone witnesses it and brings him to the place, and uh, they say you can fight, and so he's in the ring, but he's not throwing punches or anything at the other guy. The other guy's just like kneeing him in the ribs, and I was like, is this a thing that happens? Like the first time you fight, you have to just get hit a bunch of times, or is he showing that he can take a beating? I wasn't quite sure what was.
So that was he was not like fighting
He wasn't.
necessarily. It
He
was
wasn't
basic
fighting back. Yeah.
right. And so it was not like, okay, we're gonna get in the ring and see if you can fight. it was yeah, basically, you know, when he shows up, they're like, yeah, we don't deal with farang, which you'll hear the
Yeah.
word a lot in the movie. Farang literally translates to European, but it's used to refer to like any foreigner,
Sure.
you know, especially like a light-skinned foreigner. And so they're like, yeah, we don't take farang, like, you know, we know you guys, you just show up and like, you know, bring a bunch of women around, whatever, we don't like it. And he's like trying to get them to believe that like that's not why he's in Thailand. And you know, trying to convince them like, no, I want to be a fighter. Yeah, they don't buy it, they're not into it. And then after, you know, they see that yeah, he can move, whatever, he's got some grit. They bring him in, and that first thing they're doing would basically just be like a conditioning drill, just kind of like hold your arms up, let somebody hit you in the stomach with pads. So they're not, you know, they're not like teeing off on him. They're not hitting him with like
Gotcha.
really hard body hooks or anything. They're not gonna break his ribs or knock him out. But yeah, it's definitely a drill that you would do. It's like, you know, part of training is just conditioning your stomach to like absorb shots. So just, you know, getting used to being hit and kind of soaking it up. And more than like, as far as like practical purposes for this drill,
Hmm.
because I've seen places where they'll, you know, they'll be like, oh, we're just going to hit you in the face to make sure you're tough. And that's dumb. But this one actually has like a practical purpose because you're not really risking injury. They're hitting you with pads,
Mm.
but it's basically training the timing of like, as a strike is coming in, you exhale, you like flex your core so that the wind doesn't get knocked out of you and so that you kind of absorb the shot. And
Mm.
so it's practicing like that timing and just getting used to being hit without like panicking or flinching or reacting too much. But this was, yeah, basically them saying like, okay, man, like, you know, if you want to be a fighter and you want to come train at the gym, you know, like show us that you've got some grit, show us that that's, you know, what you want to do, and you're not gonna get hit a couple of times and say no thank you, I don't want to do this.
Hmm. That would be me.
Right, yeah. No, and something that I did appreciate is that a lot of movies of this like type or genre, I feel like,
Mm.
you know, and it's helpful that you have an actual fighter who actually trained at this gym, you know, playing himself and telling his real life story. But I think for a lot of films of this ilk, the temptation would be to be like, oh man, the training is so brutal. You go in and they just whip you with chains and, you know, whatever,
Right.
like have some training montage where he's just cut and bloody and he's like, I gotta power through and show them that I have heart. But it's like, no man, they hit you with pads, you know,
And
like
they
it's
go
fine.
jogging.
Yeah, and then they run, you know. And
Yeah.
it was very much just what training at that gym would have looked like, you know. Like
Right.
I think it's like a very authentic portrayal of that, where it's just kind of like, yeah, no, that's a thing you do. It's
This
not
is
like,
what we do.
yeah.
Yeah, he and Coffee bond a bit, and then the next day he begins his training. Coffee's a rad dude who we learn has been rescued by a man in power that we meet later on. Dida's cleaning bird cages and underwear, meanwhile the fighters are holding each other and kneeing each other in the ribs. Is this what you were talking about earlier about the clinch?
Yes, so this is the clinch.
That makes a lot more sense because I was just like, what are they trying to toughen their ribs or what are they doing? It's just
So
brutal.
yeah, no, that's just like, yeah, clinch sparring. So really more than any kind of like conditioning of the body or like strengthening, you know, the ribs or chest or anything, they're working more on like what their arms are doing and like the kind of the body mechanics of maintaining control in the clinch. So
Mm,
basically getting a position of dominance where like you're pulling their head down, you've got your arms inside of their arms, and you have like a dominant grip, and you're in a position to throw knees. And if you look at these sequences, you know, I hadn't even like considered this, but I guess like if you haven't, you know, done this before, you maybe look at it and you're like, "Ooh, that's brutal." They're like kneeing each other.
that's
But
correct.
if you actually like kind of look at the mechanics of what they're doing, the way they're throwing the knees, and this is how you spar it and like train it safely, because you know, if you're fighting professionally, you do this every day for like hours a day. And so if you were to just throw knees at each other, just full blast the way you would in a fight, you're going to break ribs, you're going to get injuries, it's not sustainable. So the way you do it when you're sparring is you kind of bring your leg to the outside of their body and slap their body with the inside of your knee, or like kind
Mm,
of the inside of your thigh. And in an actual fight, the way you throw this strike is you kind of make a spear with your leg and you're driving that knee straight into their body. You're like
okay.
getting, you know, the point of your knee, like sending that force straight into them. It's much more of a strike. It's more like a punch. And in training, it's more like a slap. You just come to the outside of the body
Okay.
and kind of whack them with your knee. So
That
it's,
makes sense.
it makes a loud slapping sound. And I guess,
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't considered it. I guess it probably looks like, oh man, they're like really roughing each other up. But honestly, like it doesn't hurt. It doesn't feel like anything. It's just a little like tap, tap to,
Yeah.
show them that you could have kneed them there.
Okay. I have a pretty consistent bubble, so all of it seems unpleasurable to me. So um, totally
Right,
get
right.
it. Also, everyone's wearing too little clothes for me. I am a pants and t-shirt year-round person, and if I could put a hoodie on top of that, that's great. So if someone's like, "Hey, do you want to get shirtless and rub our knees on each other's ribs?" I'd probably pass.
Oh man, see, because Vanessa and I are going to be visiting Portland this
Oh
year,
yeah,
and
I
I
know.
was I was really banking on you and I meeting up, taking our
Yes.
shirts off and rubbing knees on each other.
Oof.
So I'm
Well,
gonna I'm gonna have to like figure something else out for that day.
yeah, I would appreciate it. Or I can just have a knee stand in.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, we could get like
Yeah.
a double. Yeah.
Sure, I'll put in an ad and just in the paper for someone with nice knees. Coffee tells him he must make some big money if he wants to stay, and I learned that another way camps make money is stitches. How does this work exactly?
Yeah, so generally this is a thing that's paid by fight promoters, but it's basically if you cut your opponent, and I'm going from memory here. And it's something that I was like told once or twice at different
Okay.
stadiums or festivals or fights or whatever. So may not be 100% accurate, but if you cut them, you as the fighter who cut them get a 100 baht bonus for each stitch that they have to have, and it's I. What's funny is I never even asked. I was just like, oh yeah, that makes sense, and I assumed that it's because if you like draw blood, the crowd gets excited and the gamblers are like,
Yeah.
oh wow. And so you get a bonus for fighting more intensely. I remember there was one place that we fought where it was the fighter who got cut would actually get like extra money to cover like medical expenses. I think
Hmm.
because maybe they didn't have like a doctor like there, like which they
Or
usually, yeah,
veterinarian.
they usually have a doctor or veterinarian like ringside. But this one I think was like, hey, you'll have to like take an ambulance to the hospital down the road. So
Yeah.
they gave a little bonus. But yeah, there was I remember the stitch thing being a thing where you'd get 100 baht, which is equivalent to like $3 US per stitch. And then I remember some fights we were at, occasionally there would just be like a side bet where because gambling is huge in Thai culture, which I loved. I would just like make bets with strangers on the street. Sometimes I'd be like, "Hey, yeah, I'll bet you $100. That guy's faster than that guy," and we'd like get really into it. I had a ton of like running gambling tabs all over Thailand,
Oh wow.
and it's like very fun and encouraged there. But there would be side bets sometimes that are like, if you can hit him with like this strike that's like hard to land, then I'll give you, like a 500 baht bonus for every one that you land. And I remember we had a kid who, to motivate him, one of the gamblers was like, yeah, I'm betting on him, but I need him to know that like he's got to win, he's got to bring his A game. So he was like, if you push kick him in the face, which is like not a common thing because you got to get your leg up really high and then send your foot straight into their face. Usually, if you're like
Oh my gosh.
kicking at someone's head, it's like a roundhouse kick, kind of coming up from the
Yeah.
outside, which is like an easier, more natural angle. It's much harder to like quickly raise your foot to like face height and shoot it forward into their face. But he was like, every time you push kick him in the face, I'll give you 300 baht. And the kid was like, yeah, all right. And then proceeded to do it like 15 times and knock the
Oh
kid
my
out. But
gosh.
he went so hard on it that the gambler was like, I'm going to be bankrupt. I made no money on this fight,
Oh,
which is pretty good.
that's crazy. Dita next sweeps the ring to some rad music, and then Coffee takes him through the streets, and it seems pretty wild as they're driving through. He drops the book off, or no, he goes to drop the book off, but the guy there is a bad dude,
Mm.
and so he doesn't leave the book. But Coffee finds out where she works, so Dita goes to visit her. He next goes to a late night boxing ring. Is this like a thing? Is there like there's clearly underground boxing happening?
Yeah. So this was, I guess, later in the movie. spoilers.
The illegal fights.
Spoiler for the synopsis. Later, there are like quote unquote illegal fights where they're like fighting under a highway overpass and there's no rules. And it's in his movie. I don't know if it was in the book as well, or if this is like a liberty they took to make the film like more exciting, give it higher stakes.
Right.
I don't know if this is a thing that Dida actually did. I can say in my experience, that was not a thing that I ever found, and it was something that I looked for because, again, just to contextualize the headspace that I was in when I went there, was just like, I don't care about anything. I just want to go fight. And because I grew up watching too many martial arts movies, I was like, yeah, I want to get into the seedy shit. I want to find like the illegal underground bare knuckle shit, like. In Kickboxer, where he's like, we fight in the old way, and he like covers the racks with broken glass for some reason.
Yes.
I was like, I want to find that kind of shit. And I looked for it and I asked around, and basically any like, fighter, trainer, promoter that I talked to kind of gave me the same answer, which was like, there are so many fights in Thailand at every level of fight that like are sanctioned and are legal fights where they're allowed to have boxing there, that there would kind of be no reason for this to exist.
That makes sense.
Basically, no matter who you are, whether you've ever had any experience at all, you can find someone to pay you to step into a ring and do Muay Thai, and like they'll find an opponent who will hopefully be roughly at your level. You might get a mismatch and just get knocked out, but like if you say you've never fought and you're like a goofy looking foreigner, they'll be like, hey, has anyone here like never fought? And they'll pull some kid from the crowd and they'll throw you into the ring together. And
that's crazy.
And so like when I started looking into it, it was like, oh, there is like bare knuckle fighting, but that's basically for like most of the people who are doing the bare knuckle fighting are ones who like were trying to be like stadium champions and stuff in Bangkok and they never hit a high enough level, so they take these fights instead. And fighters that I talked to were like, they don't pay me enough money to break my knuckles, so like I would never do it. It pays worse. It's for like a lower tier of fighter. And the only thing that I found that was like happening under like highway overpasses or whatever, because I did find one, and it was called Bangkok Fight Club essentially. And it was a group of like kind of younger kids, I think, like early 20s, that were very, like, freestyle, no rules. And what it seemed to me was happening was that it was like kids who were kind of like maybe rebelling against the very like nationalist pride for Muay Thai, and instead were like importing like UFC and like mixed martial arts. And they're like, we want to do this. And so it was basically kids with like MMA gloves trying to like create an underground MMA gym, because mixed martial arts is not as big there or is like widely available. And I remember like checking it out, and it was like clearly kids who are not very good at fighting, and I was just kind of like, this is disappointing. It's just like just kind of slap fighting and having fun. And it was but the first one that he goes to, which is like at a bar, that's absolutely a thing. There are a ton of bars in Bangkok where you go in and it's just like a dive bar, but they have a little like pop-up ring that they build every night, and they have fights. And usually they'll have like kind of house fighters, dudes that just like fight there a couple times a week. But then the thing that happens where like a dude who is like clearly a fighter is like kind of drunk and sees him, and he's like, hey, Fanang, you and me fight, okay? Like you and me, we fight, we box. And Dida is like, yeah, okay, quit touching me, man. That's like 100% a thing. Like I have had that happen where you like go into a bar, they have fighting, and someone like sees the American and is like, you look like you fight, do you want to fight? And like usually I say no, because I'm like, I'm here alone, and if you knock me out, like I'm gonna have to find my way back to my hotel room with a concussion. I don't want that. But so like I have like fully been approached in that way. It's like, you want to fight next? You want to fight next? And I'm like, nah, man, I'm good. Like this doesn't, the risk reward is way off for me.
So if you did, would you have to take your shirt and shoes off?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm out again.
Yeah, you can't do it.
Next, he discovers this tattoo means good luck. So 2 more shots. The name's back in twice.
Wait. I wanna say, because I wasn't sure if you were gonna continue on that scene.
Oh yeah.
I gotta say, in this first fight, Dida gets in there with like this like kind of drunk Nakmoy who is clearly better
He's
than
got
him.
pretty good kicks.
Yeah, and is like winning the fight. And then, I mean, I don't know if this was like me looking away from the screen for a second, but correct me if I'm wrong. The bell rings at the end of the round, and then
Correct.
Dida like sucker punches him and kind
A
of
bunch.
jumps on him and like starts wailing
Yep.
on him, and people have to like pull him off. And
Yeah.
I was like, this dude sucks. This dude is terrible. He gets one opportunity to fight. He starts losing the fight and can't deal with it, so he like attacks the guy.
That's true.
Yeah, and like I don't know if like maybe that scene was meant to read as like this guy's a real jerk and he's like pushing all his buttons. He was just like having fun. He's like, hey man, let's fight, and then he's winning the fight. And I was like, this guy did nothing wrong.
No, I think it's supposed to. I think the reason that it's even in there is to show that Dida is still carrying that like aggression, and he's not like trained yet. Like
Right.
he has this force, but he doesn't understand all the nuances that you've talked about. Like, and so he's still training through all of this.
Right.
And we'll even get to where the film ends up. But oh yeah, so his name is Good Luck. A big shot guy shows up, and the other guys are going to fight for the big guy. Chok Dee must fight, and if he wins, he stays, and if he loses, he goes. And we're not going anywhere, but we are going to take a quick break, so we'll be right back after this. Oh hey, I was just deciding what to make for dinner tomorrow. How does maitake tacos with a porcini mushroom dipping broth sound? Or savory green chili corn cakes with an arugula salad? Well, how about roasted root vegetables with a habanero béarnaise sauce? Nah, I think I might go with a baked gnocchi and a carrot top pesto, but no matter which I choose, these and much more can be found at marshallshotsauce.com. That's right, the same place you'll find sauces like smoked habanero barbecue, serrano ginger lemongrass, red chili lime, and habanero carrot curry, to name a few. You will also find many creative, delicious recipes on how you can cook with each sauce. And every recipe is made with minimal ingredients and simple techniques written by Sarah Marshall, who also makes and bottles each bottle of Marshall's Hot Sauce. Plus, she just launched a new line of spice blends. The barbecue rub, by the way, is amazing, and the taco seasoning will melt off your face. Plus, her new edition of her cookbook Canning Guide Preservation Pantry is out now. Look, if you want to make your own awesome hot sauce and pickles and more, pick up Preservation Pantry. So head on over to Marshall's Hot Sauce, that's Marshall's, Haute sauce.com, and at checkout, enter VHS Podcast for 20% off. That's right, 20% off just by entering VHUS Podcast, one word, at checkout. Okay, back to the show. And we're back, and things are going okay, but he catches a punch to the face, and he's pretty sure he's going to lose. But he keeps fighting, and he loses, actually. But he gets to stay, so it's fine. You know, everything in this movie clips along really fast. It's not a long film. They don't linger on anything, so it's just on to the next thing. He now doesn't have to clean up crap. He's officially in with the fighters. We get more training and more sick beats. I think this is where he's acquiring, hopefully, some of the skills that keeps him from just angrily beating people up outside of the rules of the match. Right. He's kneeing people and they're slapping him around. I don't know what's happening here, but I made the note, there's a lot of belly touching in this movie. Is that the way it is in the fight groups? Are you always rubbing each other's bellies? There's even a part where he's in the corner with his like fight person, and you see the guy's hand slowly go down his like six pack and onto part of his shorts. It's like,
oh yeah, no, that's definitely a thing, and it's basically like no one ever like explained this to me, so I you know, maybe there's some secondary thing that I don't know about it. It was just a thing that like in my first fight they started doing, and like having it happen to you, you kind of like connect the dots. You get kicked and punched in this little kind of lower abdomen area quite a bit in Muay Thai. A pretty like common strike in Muay Thai is called the teep, which is the push kick, and so it's just kind of thrusting the ball of your foot straight forward, usually into the abdomen of your opponent. And this is very like high level Muay Thai fighters will use this the way that like a boxer might use a jab with their forward hand, which is like a quick strike that they kind of throw out there to create space and to stop you from stepping forward and to kind of control distance. And it's something that, you know, doesn't usually knock you out or hurt you a lot, cause a lot of damage, but it does like repeatedly wear on these, especially like this kind of bottom of your stomach, like right above the groin, where it's really
Mm-hmm.
hard to develop like strong muscle there, you know, like
Yeah.
you know, no matter how much core work you do, it's hard to get those last two abs at the bottom. And so you know, it's just kind of a more vulnerable area, and as you're getting hit there over and over, those muscles start to like kind of constrict and tense up, which then makes it harder to breathe, which then
Got it.
makes it harder to fight for 5 rounds. And so yeah, between rounds they definitely like give you this sort of rough massage of your abs to like,
Okay.
you know, force kind of air out of you so that you then like take these big breaths and try to kind of stretch these muscles out, keep them warm, keep them stretched so that you don't lose oxygen throughout the fight.
Ah, all right. Far less creepy. So
Yeah,
that makes
no,
sense.
just a lot of belly touching.
Yeah, it's a lot for yeah, but we get more beats and more beats as he beats the snot out of people, and we get our first flying knee
Oh,
in
that's
the film,
true.
which I didn't think we would get because it seemed. I mean, I don't know how common the flying knees are because I mostly have seen them in like en bak and through doors and windows and things. Then we go to the stadium and the old man's daughter's there and talks to Chok Dee, and the evil guy's husband see this and he says he doesn't like French people, which is not what you want to say in a French movie, but he's the guy that says it, so we know he's evil. We learn that her dad wrote tons of letters, but the prick husband never gave them to her. And the old man gets out, heads to Thailand, where Chok is having immigration problems, which you had immigration issues. And I was watching this and I was thinking, a lot of these are things that I've heard Elijah talk about. So I was like,
Yeah.
this is working out great.
Yeah, it was funny to me when he's like, "Ah, my visa," and she's like, "Oh, just like leave and come back. Everybody does it." And I was laughing because I was just like, "Yeah, no, that's very real. That's what you
That's
do."
what you
I
do.
mean, I stayed for 2 years and never had more than a 3-month visa. Um,
Wow.
Basically like with a, and I, you know, obviously don't know how it would be with a French passport, but with an American passport, when you show up the first time and just get the stamp as a tourist, that gives you 3 months. And then basically every 3 months I would cross the border to Laos. I would go to a little border town called Savannakhet and
Mm.
basically stay for a day in Savannakhet, come back over the border, get my passport stamped with a new visa, and stay for 3 more months. You can pay at the time of border crossing to like extend it a little bit, so it's maybe 4 months instead of 3 or something. But it's generally an understood thing that like 99% of the time, as long as they're getting paid,
Hmm.
no one really gives a shit. Like everybody does this. They'll, you know, some people will go to Cambodia and come back, or you know,
Right.
Malaysia. But yeah, I have heard that like if you do it for like a really long time and you get, you know, the wrong bureaucrat on the wrong day, they might be like, hey man, you've been, you know, you've got 50 tourist visas in here, you've been here for 5 years on a tourist visa, and they might, you know, say no or like deny you reentry or whatever. So I was always kind of worried about that, but I was also pretty consistently reassured that like worst case scenario, you might have to bribe someone, which did happen once. I did have to bribe a guy one time because he was giving me a hard time about it. And I, you know, did have enough tourist visas at that point that he probably could have, you know, had my passport
Hmm.
red stamped and like denied me reentry. But he was there. There were two occasions in my time in Thailand where I had to bribe people, and it's like a pretty like understood, you know, if maybe like largely unspoken thing that like most of Thailand will accept a bribe. Like a lot of like Thai bureaucrats and Thai police, you know, and obviously there's levels at which this is not the case, but if you're a foreigner, a lot of the time you can get by on bribes. And there
Hmm.
were two times that I was in a position where I was like, man, this is my livelihood right now. Like if I, you know, and this was one where I specifically had a fight coming up in like 4 days or something, and the visa timing
Oh,
was just
geez.
really unfortunate. And I was like, I can't afford to overstay. I have to go and come back, but I should be training. Every day that I lose is like, you know, hurting me on this fight. So I felt very much like, you know, all of my possessions and belongings, like everything I have in this world, is back at the gym, you know, like outside of what's currently in my backpack. You know, if I miss this fight, I, you know, might get kicked out of the gym, whatever. And so I'm just like, man, my whole life right now is riding on crossing this border. This guy can do whatever he wants. You know, this guy can ask me for any sum and I'm beholden to him. Like I'm completely at his mercy.
Right.
And it was basically like the laws had changed a few times in the year plus that I had been there, where first it was a tourist visa, and then I'm crossing back and they're like, what are you doing in Thailand? And I say Pom Nak Moi, like I'm a kickboxer. And they say, oh well, if you're working here you should have a work visa. Like if you're kickboxing you need a work visa. So then I leave and I get the work visa and I come back, and then the next time I'm coming back on the work visa and they're like, oh, you're a kickboxer, you need a sports visa for kickboxing specifically. And for a brief period they had a specific boxing visa, so they like
Wow.
changed it every time. And the guy catches me with like the wrong visa, and he's like, oh, I don't know, man, I don't think I can let you in. And I'm like, I have to go back, man. I have a fight. Come on. And a lot of the time, like, because Muay Thai is the national sport and there's a lot of like love for it, if I was like, I'm a kickboxer, I do Muay Thai, they'd be like, oh hell yeah, like I did Muay Thai, like let's talk fight. Or they're just like, oh yeah, you're American but you love the Thai national sport, we love to see it, go on ahead. So I'm like kind of trying to work that angle, and I'm like naming like famous fighters that I've like met or like trained with that he might know, and he's just not having it. He's not into Muay Thai. He doesn't like my shtick at all, and he's just like, yeah, I don't know, man. I think you got to stay in Lao or like go back to America. I don't think I can let you in. And the way that I was taught, at least by my trainer, to like proposition a bribe to a Thai bureaucrat or police officer
Mm-hmm.
was to ask if there's anything I can do to help. Like, can I help the situation?
Okay.
Like, it seems like it's maybe I can help you. I can help you fix this. Is there anything I can do to help? And he was like, he looks around and he like kind of makes sure no one else is like within earshot. And he's like, you really got to get back in there, huh? I'm like, yeah, man, I have a fight coming up. It's a big fight, big fight. And he's like, I mean, maybe. And he's kind of like doing the gesture for like money.
Okay.
And I'm thinking like, this dude knows that I'm a foreigner. He thinks that I have a lot more money than I do. And at this point, like I've been living and working full time in Thailand for like a year. So I make as much as, anyone living in Thailand. I'm not on the American dollar at this point. So I'm just like, fuck, man, he's going to ask for a huge amount. I'm not going to have it. I'm not going to know what to do. And he's like, maybe 500 baht, which is approximately equivalent to like 15 American dollars, like 1.5. And I was like, oh, 500 baht? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, yeah, no, I can do that. I was expecting him to say like 1,000 US or something, and it was $15. I was just like, oh yeah, no problem, man. And I like hand him 500. I'm like, cool, we good? He stamps it, and I'm just like so relieved because I was like sweating bullets, and he's like, oh man, it's gonna be $15, and I'm like, oh all right, yeah, no, that's fine, that's great.
I wish more bribes went that way, like just reasonable sums.
Yeah, just like bring me lunch sometime, and we'll call it good. Yeah,
that's awesome. Next, we get a very JCVD motorcycle ride with the lady. They spend the day at the beach, and then there's some smooches. And in honor of that, it's time to play a game. Are you ready? It's time to play JCVD Movie, Erotic Film, or both.
Ooh, that's a fun game.
Yeah.
All right.
And we're going to acknowledge just up top that for some people, every Jean-Claude Van Damme movie is an erotic film.
They are all pretty erotic.
Yeah. So there's 5.
Okay.
And again, your choices are Jean-Claude Van Damme movie, erotic film, or both.
Okay.
Number 1, Minions: Rise of Gru.
I'm gonna say Jean-Claude Van Damme movie because
you are correct.
Not erotic. I didn't know that JCVD was in that, but I guess he was.
He's the voice, and it comes out next year.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I think he's one of the minion. I forget what the name of the character is, but yeah.
Jean-Claude.
Number 2, Double Impact.
That I'm gonna say is both. I know it's a Jean-Claude movie, and I would assume yes.
You're correct. Right. Number 3, Hard Target.
I mean, I'm gonna say just Jean-Claude movie.
Yes. Okay. Oh my gosh, yes. There's no tricking you. Number 4, Kung Fu Panda 2.
God, I mean, it's a pretty erotic movie, but I'm gonna say just a Jean-Claude movie.
You're correct. Okay. It's just Jean-Claude. I wish it was an erotic film, but sadly no. Not one that's legally obtainable anyway. Number 5, pound of flesh.
I feel, the way you emphasize the word pound made it sound more erotic than I think that title actually is. So I'm going to say just Jean-Claude movie.
Oh, well, you were bound to get one
Is
wrong.
it
It's
both?
both.
No!
Yes. But 4 out of 5, you win the game.
All
So
right.
congratulations.
Thank you.
Back at another stadium, he sweeps the leg of a dude and wins. What's with the aggressive legs in kickboxing? Is that just what it started with? Just the kicking? Because there's just so much of it.
Oh, there's a lot of kicking. Yeah, I mean, like I said, a lot of Thai gyms are not as focused on like boxing and like throwing punches. There is, I think, a kind of a sense in a lot of like Muay Thai gyms that's like, if I can kick harder than a fucking horse. I guess I was trying to think of something that kicks very hard. But yeah, if I could just chop this guy down, then that's essentially all I need to do to win. If I can kick his legs until his legs give out, if I can kick him in the chest so hard that it breaks his ribs, then that's it. And I think it like is a mentality that works for some gyms that train it well and intelligently, and there are some gyms that it kind of becomes a deficit or a crutch because it defaults to basically like, okay, my right roundhouse kick is the hardest strike that I know how to throw. I'm just gonna throw that. I'm just gonna kick the hell out of this dude because it's my strongest thing. Why would I not just do my strongest thing over and over? And yeah, it works for some fighters and some gyms, but not all the time, obviously. And there are gyms that like have a strong emphasis on specifically leg kicks. Sitmanchai is a gym that I really like. Never trained there, but just like friends with a lot of their fighters and trainers because we just like had a good relationship with our gym. But like Sitmanchai focuses kind of just on boxing and low kicks rather than like like a lot of like clinch work. And a lot of those guys, you'll watch them go out there and just kick a guy's leg over and over in the same spot and just kind of like step back, step around him, and kick that leg in the same spot until the leg just buckles, And it's a thing where like if you're not used to it, which I think especially like a lot of like foreign fighters are not as much. I say foreign, I mean like Falang, like like me. I think a lot of fighters who are not used to it, you kind of underestimate the severity of it. So it's a way that you can take a guy out before he really even notices the damage that's been done to him, because it's not like if you get hit in the chin, that you've been hit. You like you get rocked a little bit. Your head snaps around, maybe your vision goes for a second. If you get hit in the nose, you feel that. You get the self-preservation thing that tells your head to move backwards. If you're bleeding from the nose, obviously you're like, ow, that sucked, and you're a little more on guard. You're like, I'm going to fight a little more defensively now. You get kicked in the side of the leg, for the most part you feel okay. You're like, yeah, that hurt a little bit, but it's like it's my thigh. It's like it's a meaty muscle. It can take some hits, and they keep doing it, and you're focused on punching them in the face or whatever your game plan is. And then before you know it, like your IT band just can't take it anymore. That knee just buckles. And so yeah, you'll watch fights where a guy is like not doing anything to stop the low kick, not defending it, not blocking it, not answering it with anything, because he doesn't really perceive it as a big threat. And then pretty quickly he can't lift that leg and he's shuffling around really slow and then eventually falls down. So yeah, it's definitely a tactic.
Definitely. That's fascinating. Well, Dida gets reamed for not winning by knockout in a fight, even though he won. And the old guy teaches him more about some elbows because they really want to show in these fights. That's true. The old man gets wasted and sad, and the next day reconnects with his daughter. So that's good. He says he kidnapped her mom, which is a sweet story to tell someone. Back in the ring, Chok Dee drops the elbow once again and hits the goodnight button, and that guy is out. Now he's one fight away from the championship, and the old guy was double-crossed in the past, and he's offered some money, but he doesn't take it. He says, we're going to war. And then Chok Dee hears about the illegal fights we talked about earlier. He gets the backroom champ and instantly gets fucked up, but fights back and wins, which is pretty great. There's a lot of like bleeding that happens in this movie in the fights. Is there a lot of bleeding I mean, I know your story you opened
Yeah,
up
I
with
mean,
was
I
involved
guess
bleeding.
I had 12 career fights. I think 8 wins, 4
Mm-hmm.
losses, and I want to say that I bled in three three of them, maybe 4. But I had one fight where I got cut under the eye. The guy just kind of stepped in with
Oof.
his elbow. He just like punched it straight forward and
Whoa.
went right between my guard and cut me under the eye. I loved that guy. By the way, quick side note: it was my
Yeah.
second fight, and it was his first fight. So we're both relatively inexperienced fighters. And at
Wow.
this point,
Yeah.
he was not represented by a gym. He didn't have a trainer because when you're first starting out in Isan, you go to places where there are going to be fights, and you show up early that day for matchups, because they'll have kind of like the scheduled fights that are like, here's our like local like regional champ, or like here's like these 2 up and coming fighters that everyone wants to see. But then they fill out the card with a lot of fights, and fights will go until like 2-3 in the morning. So people show up for matchups, and basically matchups, by the way, extremely surreal experience. My trainer told me, like, do not smile. She's like, I know you like to like fucking joke and run your mouth or whatever. She's like, don't say anything, don't smile, don't laugh, don't try to like charm anyone. She's like, keep your head down, look at the ground, and look miserable. And I was like, why? And she's like, if they put you next to someone and they're like, hey, fight this guy, don't be like, yeah, I'll fight this guy. Look like you don't want to. Like, look at the ground, look like you feel like shit, and like we're forcing you to do this. And I was like, why?
Right.
And it's because this is where the gamblers and promoters all kind of collectively decide who's going to be fighting each other. And if you go in there and you're like, yeah, let's do it, let's fight, man, all right, then they're going to be like, this guy fights, he's American,
Mm.
he probably fucking fights in the UFC back home or something. He came here, he's cocky, like this guy must be good, he's at a high level. Anyone who comes to matchups and they're being paired with a complete stranger, like most people who are there, they're there because like they maybe like need some extra money. They're not career
Mm-hmm.
fighters. They're not professional fighters that do this for a long time. They're people who've maybe fought a few times, and like they're short on rent this month, so they're like, yeah, I'm gonna go take a fight. I'll make $50 and it'll help out. So most people look miserable to be there. If you show up and you're like, let's go, they're gonna put you against like the biggest badass there, and you're gonna get knocked out. So I go and I'm like trying to look miserable,
Right.
and they, bring up, in my first time at matchups, they bring up another kid who looks miserable, and it turned out he hustled us. He had like 200 pro fights. My first fight, I got destroyed. Second fight, I go, and the gamblers are like, lifting up my shirt, they're grabbing my stomach, they're like, ah, he's fat, he's slow, he's weak, and like, I don't even want to bet on this guy. They ask, is there anyone here who has no experience? No experience. Look at this guy, he's a schlub. And this kid comes out and he's like, yeah, I've never fought, but I play soccer. And they're like, all right, cool, he plays soccer. And they ask him, what's your ring name? And he asks me, he's like, what's your ring name? I don't have one. I've never fought before. And ask
Ask
Pony
Pony
Baloney.
Baloney.
How did you guess? First try. No, my trainer chose for me the ring name Petta Meo, which literally translates to Diamond Eyes Cat. And I, to this day, don't know why. I don't know
Whoa.
why I got that name, but I think it's cool as hell. I loved it. And I asked about it. I was like, Diamond Eyes Cat? And she's like, yeah, you love cats. And I was like, okay, sold.
It
Right,
sounds
it's
like
an
a Shaw
absurd
Brothers
name. Did
movie.
not match my skill level at all. It's way cooler. But yeah, so he
I
asks
love
me,
it.
and they're like, Tameo, and he cracks up laughing. And a gambler's like, wait, you don't have a fight name? And he's like, no, man, I don't fight. I work at 7-Eleven. And he's like, I'll be the Diamond of 7-Eleven. And I thought that was like the coolest response to like, your Diamond Eyes Cat? Fuck it, I'm Diamond 7-Eleven. I was like, yes.
That's
Uh,
pretty. Did it
yeah, I
stick?
mean,
Did he
that's the
get to
name
be
he
that
used
name?
in our fight. I don't know if he ever fought again, but that's for
Oh,
the one time I fought with this guy. At least he was Diamond 7. But yeah, I did
did
win.
you win?
That one,
Nice.
he didn't have great cardio, so he was actually winning the fight. He was putting on a kind of a better show than I was. He cut me under the eye. He said like, I've never fought. I've only I play soccer, but like he knew how to fight. He had clearly trained. But
Right.
throughout the fight, I kept getting him in the clinch and just putting pressure on his neck, on his airway. I was kind of like crossing one glove over the front to cover his nose and mouth, put pressure on his trachea, on his carotid or jugular, like every time that I could, because it was kind of the best, tool that I had throughout this fight. Every time that I could, I was choking the shit out of him. And
When you did that, did he take a big gulp?
Yes, but he did.
Yes.
As the fight goes on, he's essentially winning the fight. He's kind of beating me up, but he's gassing out. He's like just gasping for air. So by the maybe fourth round, he went to throw a kick and just stumbled and fell down, and he couldn't breathe. He was totally gassed out. And I remember gamblers being like, "What the fuck happened? He got tired of beating him up. Like, he didn't even get hit with anything." But in my heart, I'm like, I've been choking him for 15 minutes. So like, but yeah,
Right.
he cut me. The aforementioned funeral fight was definitely like my nastiest cut. I think I got a bloody nose at one point, which minor thing. But then the cut over my eye from the funeral fight, I fought again either the next day or like 2 days later. So I still had the cut, and they don't let you fight with stitches. And this is a rule that definitely, like, as soon as they said it, you realize it's one of those rules that had to be made because someone did this once and they're like, oh, okay. They were like, if you have stitches, you might clinch someone and then use the stitches in your face to scratch their eyes, because you have this like thread sticking out that you can like cut someone's cornea with. And so before the fight, they took tweezers and a little knife. No, they had me do it. They gave me tweezers and a little knife and a mirror, and I had to pull my stitches out before fighting. So, and of course, I didn't do like an amazing job of like cutting these out of me. So I was actively bleeding before I even like stepped in the ring. Like, I just had already opened this cut up and like walked in with my face all bloody. And they were like, "What happened? You got into a fight on the way to the fight," which was fun. But yeah, so I bled a bit. I don't think I ever bled as much as Dida does in this movie. There's a lot of blood in this.
Yeah, there's a lot. It's like all from the face and mouth. It's just, I don't know how they do that, but the old guy bribes the big guy to end the illegal fights and gives Chok Dee his cape. We see Chok in the qualifying championship stadium. Notice I said qualifying. He's strolling to the ring. Do you have any profound memories of moments where you're going to the ring? It seems like that's a thing where you have to be in a certain headspace, or what are you thinking about? What goes through you pre-fight?
Yeah, actually, I mean, it is a really, I think unique thing where like that moment, that feeling for me was not like comparable to anything else that I had, ever done. And I will say that like by the time I was at my, what would have been like my last career fight, and this is actually a thing for me, by the time I got to like my last fight, I realized that I didn't feel nearly like as big as I had about it in every other fight, where like walking into the ring, it felt like I was clocking in for my job. It felt like, yeah, I'm going to work. Like, I'm,
Gotcha.
going to do this job that I do. I wasn't nervous at all. Had the fight, won the fight, and then after winning the fight, still was not like any kind of like elevated feeling. It's just like, yeah, no, I won, I got paid, that was cool.
Yeah.
And that was actually like my signal to me that I needed to like find something else, because I was like, yeah, as soon as it starts to feel like a day job, then maybe I should be doing a day job where like I don't get concussions. Like if I don't have that passion at this point, then like, what am I doing? And but having said that, yeah, the first 10 fights, whatever, I was super nervous, super overwhelmed, but had this like kind of hyper focus of just like, it's just me and the ring, not even the opponent really. I wasn't even like as aware of like the other person who was going to be in there with me. It was like just me. And yeah, it felt very grounding and very like present in my body in a way that I don't usually feel. And in one sense was like extremely nervous, but in another sense, like all of the kind of running monologue of anxiety that is there 90% of the time was gone. It was like, just a very like quiet kind of thing. And yeah, I mean, I remember the first time I got into the ring, I kind of stumbled over the top rope because I was used to going in under the ropes, and they're like, no, when you fight, you go over the top rope, and no one had told me this, so I'd never done it before. So I like kind of tripped and fell into the ring, and everyone laughed, and I was like, yeah, it's fun. That's a good way to start. Yeah.
It's a good
and
start.
then you see at one point in the movie, he's like learning kind of a little dance with another fighter. This is called a Y crew, which Y is like greeting or like salutation, when they do kind of like the hands in front of their face pressed together as if like in prayer and like greet each other like sawadee. That's called a Y. Crew means teacher. So it's basically like you showing respect to your gym and your trainer and your teacher and like your elders. And it was like an important part of Muay Thai culture. As Falang, like I did not learn a Y crew and was not like told to learn a Y crew. It's just kind of like, yeah, it doesn't totally make sense for you to be doing it. But my opponent was doing his Y crew. They told me like just walk to each corner of the ring and then walk back to your corner. And I kind of got in my head about it because I didn't know, I'm like, he's doing this thing that's like culturally significant and maybe even like kind of has like a vaguely sort of spiritual feeling to it. And it feels like, he's like doing this like respectful thing and paying tribute to like his elders and ancestors, like people who came before him and passed this knowledge on to him. And I was like, yeah, I'm kind of doing nothing, but I'm like in my head about it. So I actually walked to each corner and like in my head, and I'm not at all like a religious or spiritual person, but in my head gave like a little kind of silent prayer to deceased relatives of mine, that I was just kind of like, like, hey, like mom, I hope that, like if there's any sort of like afterlife or like if there's anything in the universe, like give me some luck, like it may like help me not get killed.
Yeah.
And go to the next one. I'm like, my Uncle Rick, my Uncle Rod, my grandpa, and I'm like naming like the people that I've lost in my life at each corner. And I'm just like, all right, guys, like, if that's a thing, give me your blessing, and yeah, I don't know, not something I've really like, I've never really prayed before, but it just kind of like felt natural in that moment. So yeah, definitely like a unique thing, especially the first few times.
I love that. Well, something that's very unique is the evil husband shows up, and while Chok Dee is fighting the fight, stabs the old man in the back, and he dies while Chok knocks the guy out. The old man dies as the last thing we see. There's no big crane kick. The old man's daughter floats pedals on water from a boat, and then French hip hop, the movie's over, and then it says 6 months later he wins the championship. So we don't even get to see him win it. This is the craziest. It's like if 8 Mile ended before Eminem, like
before he
just like what a weird way to end it. Like it ends with a fight, but it doesn't even give us like the Rocky moment. They're just clearly not concerned with those sort of like Western things. Whereas like our version of this movie ends with like Jean-Claude Van Damme just like screaming at the top of the ropes or something. And we're all just like, yes. And in this one, he just watches his favorite person be murdered.
True. It's very much. And then if Rocky showed him running up the stairs and being like, yes, and then cut to credits and it was like 6 months later he fought Apollo Creed. like what?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the craziest. The first time I watched it, I didn't even notice, and then the second time I was like, that is the weirdest way that this
baffling
could
end. Choice. Like, and I don't know if I don't know his true story. I don't know if Dida's like friend and mentor was actually stabbed to death at Rajadamnern, which I realized, by the way, earlier we were talking about the Mecca of Muay Thai. I think he is talking about the stadium, Rajadamnern, which I've definitely been to a bunch, because when I lived in Bangkok, I just went to see fights all the time. And there's 2 main stadiums in Bangkok. It's Rajadamnern and Lumpini. And those are the 2 where like the highest level fighters, compete. So I've never fought at Rajadamnern, but I have, been there a bunch. But so there, he's watching the fight and gets stabbed in the back. And I love he doesn't turn around. He doesn't like look to see. He realizes he's like and makes the face, but he just keeps watching the fight. And the guy just gets away. He just leaves and like gets away with murdering him.
Yeah. He stabs him like 4 times.
And the guy who like we know can fight. We saw him like throw an elbow at our dude earlier. So he kind of like turned around and elbowed this guy, but he just like couldn't bring himself to look away. He's like, he's doing it. He's fighting at Rajadamnern, and then just dies. Yeah, don't know if that actually happened, but like bonkers way to end the movie.
It's so weird. It's so bizarre. But that's the end of Chok Dee, which brings us to the final questions, which
Okay.
are just about you.
I've never been stabbed at
Yeah.
Rashomon. So we'll get that one out.
Okay, well, hold on. Crossing this
Throw
off.
out some of your questions right off the
Good.
bat.
Yeah, that's done. What did you like about being a professional
Oh
kickboxer?
man. No, I mean the thing we, kind of touched on earlier, but it just really was good for my mental health in a lot of ways. And I feel like that's one of the most cliche things that it can be, but it was true for me. I feel like you hear a lot about like, oh, like fighting saved me, and martial arts saved my life, whatever. I was, super depressed for long stretches of time, and had actually, prior to going to Thailand, had made an attempt on my life, which, thank God, did not work. I survived,
Right.
and I'm grateful for that. But at the time, I had still not really kind of like recovered from that. And while I wasn't actively attempting suicide, I still had kind of felt like I had like forfeit my life. I was like, yeah, like I kind of already gave up on this. So whatever else happens doesn't matter. And so fighting for me almost was kind of arbitrary. It was like, yeah, I always thought those movies were cool, and like, I don't know, my mom used to get into a lot of fights, as what I heard from other family members. I was like, that seems cool, let me try it. And I will say, like, I wasn't great. I was not, I never fought at a high level. I had a pretty mixed record, and my trainer would be the first to say, like, not a good fighter. But I still just, I don't know, I really enjoyed getting into the ring. I didn't even enjoy training, honestly. There's guys who like, they, because you wake up at sunrise and you run 5 miles or whatever every day. And there were guys who were like, yeah, no, we love it. This is my life. This is what I like. And not me. For me, it was like a means to the end. Everything that I was doing was, to get me to the point that I could next step into the ring and fight. And that being said, I think part of the reason that I was never, aside from just physical ability, the reason I was never like a great fighter is that the attitude of a lot of fighters, that when you look at like champions and like high level fighters, they're guys who they believe they're the best, they believe they can be the best, they push themselves every day because they're like, I'm gonna be a fucking champion. Anyone you put in front of me, I'm gonna knock them out. They have this kind of ego that's sort of necessary to compete at a high level. And when they're fighting someone, they go in there with intent to like hurt this person, to win this fight. They're, and at lower levels, it's a pretty friendly thing, honestly. I definitely fought guys who could have hurt me way worse, and even like kind of let me know. They would like put me in a position where I'm like, he's about to knee me in the face and it's gonna break my jaw, and I'm like totally helpless in the clinch, and I'm like, this guy's gonna break my jaw, this sucks. And then he lets me go, and he basically shows me like, I can do this, and then he lets me go. And I had a few of those where they did enough to win. They make sure that everyone knows that they're the better fighter. They're going to win this fight. They win on decision, but they don't knock me out when they could have. And I appreciate that. But for the most part, yeah, no, right.
Me too.
But for the most part, like, dudes who get very good at it, they believe that they can be very good at it, and they have kind of an intent to like win every fight that they get into. I never had that, because for me, it wasn't about my opponent. It wasn't about like my career. It wasn't about what I did with fighting.
Right.
It was literally just about me. It was just about like stepping in there and feeling not even like comfortable in my skin, but not like second guessing every action that I was taking, forcing me to just commit to a thing and do the thing, and not having like the time or self-consciousness or like introspection or anxiety to worry that every choice I was making in the moment was the wrong one, because you don't have the time to do that. You don't have the ability to like, second guess or like lie about anything, or like present a false version of yourself, because it's so matter of fact. There's no pretense. And
right. Yeah.
I think I'd worked in sales for a long time and been miserable because all day every day it was me basically trying to get people to be my friends so they trusted me enough to buy an expensive thing. And it was so disingenuous and felt terrible. And doing something where it is pure earnesty. You are exactly as good at fighting as you are. You can't give any illusion of anything else. It was really important for me. And I think, by the end of my career, kind of realized like, yeah, I'm never going to be like a champion fighter, but I'm a little more comfortable in my own body and in my skin. So yeah, I guess that was my favorite part of it. And when I broke that guy's
Awesome.
ribs, that was cool.
Yeah, fuck his ribs. What was a good day like for you?
God, a day when I had the day off. I would actually, yeah, the best days, like easy answer, would be a day after having won a fight, or maybe like a couple of days after having won a
Mhm.
fight, because there are periods of time where you're like expected to be fighting really regularly, and it's always like a pretty busy fight schedule compared to how often people fight like in the West. Because like an American kickboxer will maybe fight like every 6 months, and in Thailand you're fighting like every couple of weeks. But basically, if you have a fight, you win, and it's like kind of a big fight for you, whatever level you're at. So you get a little bit of money in your pocket, and you don't have another fight booked immediately, or that your next fight isn't for like 2 weeks. So you don't immediately have to go back to like a hardcore training camp. You're not like trying to cut weight. You don't have to like really make sure that your conditioning is like at its peak right now, because you're like, I got a couple of weeks. In 3 or 4 days I'll start like seriously
Right.
training. But right now, like, I got money in my pocket, I won, so I'm kind of like riding high on this buzz. My trainer, my friends at the gym are like happy with me. They're like, good show, man, you did good. And you're like, I'm gonna go get a pint of ice cream and like drink a beer and just have a good time. And my favorite thing in the world
Yeah.
was when it would line up that like me and another fighter like fought at the same event, both won, and neither of us had another fight for a little while. And we could be like, yo, let's go to Bangkok for the weekend. Let's take a motorcycle, let's go to Bangkok and just like drink and eat a bunch of like barbecue. And like, because fighter diet, you're usually just eating like rice and chicken and like pretty like good tasty stuff, but kind of the same few things over and over, so you maintain like your
Mhm.
athleticism and like weight, because you're gonna walk around at the weight that you fight at. But when it was like I think in retrospect kind of unhealthy binge eating behavior, but it would be like we're gonna go to Bangkok
Sure.
and we're gonna eat more fucking food than you've ever seen, and just like get fat for 2 days and then
Yeah.
come back and like go back to work. But yeah, there was something about it because it felt like like a cool weekend where you have no plans and you get to hang out with your friends. But it was also a weekend that you like earned by fist fighting someone. So that like it was yeah, it's like
Yeah.
kind of a unique buzz that you get to ride. So yeah,
That's so funny. What is a bad day like?
losing a fight that you feel like you should have won, or losing a fight
Oh yeah.
spectacularly, which I definitely did. There was a fight that I had against a dude who was like a cop who like fought on the side. So, I don't know enough about
Great.
the infrastructure over there, the police system or police force of Thailand, so I can't say it. But blanket, not a fan of cops. In my experience,
Right.
100% of them are bastards. So, I was like, yeah, fuck this cop. But I had had an injury from a previous fight a few days earlier, and I'd won the previous fight, but my left leg was shot. Like, I could not use my left leg.
Uh,
And you need your left leg to block a right kick. And so he realized pretty early in the first round that I had no answer to a right roundhouse kick. So he just kicked me in the ribs for 5 rounds. And it sucked because I was
uh,
like, this guy's not actually that good. I could 100% beat this dude
yeah.
if I wasn't hurt. So I was very frustrated by that fight. I got a rematch with him later and I knocked him out, which was great. But then there was my one and only stadium fight was at a Max Muay Thai, Max Stadium.
Wait, can I ask what move knocked him out?
Yeah, it was a left body hook. I'm southpaw, so my left is like my stronger hand, and body hook from a left hand. You have a chance at hitting them in the liver. It's a tough shot, but you kind of have to like get a knuckle sort of like between their bottom two ribs
Ugh.
on their right side. But if you get hit in the liver, it sucks. It's really hard to recover from a liver shot because your liver filters toxin out of your blood.
Yeah, it
If it
does.
gets a sharp impact, some kind of blunt trauma to it, a lot of that toxin is quickly released back into your
Oh.
bloodstream and like in a really like system shocking kind of way. So I've been kicked in the liver, and it was weird because I felt like totally lucid. I was like not like knocked out, but my arms and legs did not work and my body fell down. So I was
Whoa.
just like, like, yeah, I'm still fighting, I'm good. And then like my body just shut down and I was laying there like I can't stand up. It didn't, it didn't even hurt that bad, but I was just like, I'm fucking done. And yeah, got him with a left body hook and he kind of just folded over and was still conscious, but went down and didn't get back up after the 8 count. So pretty sure it was a liver shot. And afterwards he was like, yeah, I could have kept fighting. I could have kept fighting. I just, didn't want to. And so, but I knocked him out with that.
Right. Cool.
But yeah, then I had one stadium fight at a Max Stadium in Pattaya, and I was like an undercard fight for some other bigger thing that was going to be on television. Mine was not on television, thank God. And the guy, I have no memory of the fight, but the guy was apparently much better at fighting than me, because I remember like walking out, touching gloves, and being like, yeah, all right. And then I remember waking up backstage with a doctor shining a light in my eyes. And I was standing up like, oh, I got to fight, man. I'm supposed to get out there. I'm supposed to fight. And he was like, no, you fought. You lost. And
Whoa.
yeah, I asked my trainer. She's like, I didn't even see what it was, man. He just knocked you out really quick. She's like, it was probably an elbow, but like he was kind of sneaky and I didn't even see it. But yeah, I guess that guy was just like a really severe mismatch for me. I guess he was like a pretty solid fighter who had knocked out like a few guys before me. And then, they kind of threw me to the wolves on that one. But yeah, I had like a really nasty concussion and it kind of sucked because it was supposed to be my next, or like kind of my first big like step up in terms of like fighting career, where it was like, oh, like fighting at a stadium. If I do well here, gonna have more stadium fights, gonna get more like high pay. They'll keep booking me at the stadium. Eventually I'll fight on television, whatever. And to be knocked out unceremoniously in the first round was a pretty big blow to my whole sense of morale and stuff.
Sure.
Which I guess, is another one of those like attitude things that set me apart from like someone who's actually successful at it, is that, like a quote unquote like real fighter would just be like that motivates them. It's like, all right, I'm going to train even harder. I'm going to knock that guy out the next time we meet. Like, fuck that. I'm going to fight harder than I've ever fought before. And I was like, my brain sucks now. Like I can't remember shit. And to me, that was just scary. I was like, man, I love fighting, but I also love writing. And like, if I can't write stuff because I get hit in the head too many times, like maybe it's not worth it. So yeah,
at least you have an excuse where you're like, well, I was a fighter for 2 years in Thailand, so my memory's a little weird. Whereas I just don't remember things. And people are like, why? And I'm like, I guess I'm just broken. I'm not sure.
I guess I'm just dumb. What's funny is I don't even use it as an excuse. I am always like, I guess my brain's bad, but you're right. I could just be like, oh, I got hit in the head a lot. I fought.
Yeah, your excuse sounds awesome.
Yeah, I'm gonna use that all the time. I'm gonna tell my wife right after this. I'm gonna be like, honey, the reason I don't remember things when you tell them to me.
Yeah, remember when I was like a hero for 2 years, like action stars? That's why. It's pretty cool reason.
I was so far from an action star.
Oh no, we're getting figures made. Any advice?
Like for you? Or
no, for someone interested in I like to always pause.
I was gonna say like invest in real estate if you ever have the opportunity. Start putting money away in a Roth IRA.
Okay, I'm writing this down.
No. For people interested in fighting, yeah, I mean definitely pursue it.
Did you start by going to a gym here, or did you just go right to Thailand and just be like, I'll take everybody on?
No, I definitely trained a bit here first. Even had like a couple of amateur MMA fights here before I got to Thailand. But yeah, I mean, if it's something that you have even like the slightest interest in, even if you're not like, yeah, I want to go to Thailand and fight, but you're just like, I don't know, like I like action movies, it seems cool, like learning martial arts seems like it might be fun, or you're just someone who maybe feels like they could benefit from the confidence boost of maybe like learning how to throw a couple of punches. I think it's absolutely worth pursuing. Look up a gym near you, find, check out some reviews, find a good gym. And of course, like it's, gyms can be a crapshoot. Sometimes you go into a gym and they have that, big like alpha male macho attitude. You run into it a lot more in America than you do in Thailand. But, those guys who are like, everyone who comes in through the door, they're like, I'm a fighter and I'm going to knock you out. I'm like, if you get that vibe, don't go. But 95% of martial arts gyms, they're going to be super welcoming. It's a very like familial vibe. They're going to be very friendly to newcomers. No one's going to try to knock you out. No one's going to try to hurt you. I know a lot of people get intimidated where they're like, it sounds like it could be cool, but I'm worried I'm going to go in and someone's just going to punch me in the face and that doesn't sound fun. That's usually not going to happen. 9 times out of 10, You're not going to get that vibe. It's going to be people who, they want you to get good at fighting. They want to work with you in like a slow, safe, steady environment where they, go at the rate that you're learning at, and they're not going to throw you to the wolves most of the time.
Yeah, because that's a terrible business model. If you showed up and you're like, I want to learn to fight, they just punched you in the face and they're like, come back tomorrow.
Yeah.
You'd be like, I don't think I'm going to do that.
Right. Most of the time, you're not going to. So yeah, they want you to, be a student. They want you to keep learning, get better. So I think it's absolutely worth checking out for anyone who has even like the slightest inclination. Most gyms have like a free trial period, so you can go for a week, take a week of classes, and just feel it out, see how it feels, regardless of what fitness level or experience level you're at. It's super fun, might be good for your mental health, will definitely be good for your physical health, and you might discover something from it that you weren't expecting to find, which was definitely true for me.
Excellent. This is the last question, and Elijah, it's my favorite question.
All right.
Elijah, what are your dreams like?
Oh man. Well, ever since the concussions,
no, I don't remember them.
No, I genuinely do not, but I don't think it's related to fighting. For most of my adult life, I don't tend to remember my dreams. I go to sleep, I wake up, I have no recollection. I also,
that's good. At least they're not stress dreams.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I'm not having, nightmares. I'm not having stress dreams. I do have sleep apnea, so like maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know if the two are related, but yeah, it's very few and far between that I remember my dreams. There was a period of time immediately following my mother's death where I had the same dream every night that like she had faked her death and came back to life.
Oh, that'd be so cool if she ran into her in Thailand.
Yeah, that would have been so good. But yeah, as a dream, it kind of sucked because then I had to wake up and be like, wait, which one is the real one? Oh, it's this one.
That sucks.
Yeah. So, but fortunately, those eventually stopped, and yeah, don't have a lot of dreams that I remember currently. Also, I realized I didn't clarify if you meant like the kind when you go to sleep, or if you meant like aspirations. Okay.
No, cool. People. A lot of times people just start being like, "Oh, I always wanted to learn to fly," and I'm like, "No, that's not what I'm talking about."
No, I mean the sleep.
I don't want to hear about that.
Yeah. No.
When you go to bed. Yeah. Okay, great. Well, you win, and the trophy is our hearts, Elijah. Oh, thank you so much for watching Chok Dee and for sharing your story. I really appreciate it. Kicking and Screaming is the podcast. Please listen to it with Elijah and Vanessa.
Vanessa Guerrero, yeah, she's my wife and co-host. You can find us at Kick Scream Pod on all forms of social media. And also, to go back one step, if you are, I know I said like if you're interested in like learning martial arts or whatever, just like look up a gym and go. If you are specifically interested in like going to Thailand to fight, but have, questions or anxiety about that, please feel free to reach out on Twitter. I love talking about it, and I feel like I do have like a lot of general like tips or advice to give in that, in that sense. So yeah, if you're considering training in Thailand, drop me a line. You can find me on Twitter.
Elijah_pizza.
That's right. That's me.
Yeah. And I think you should, because when I was listening to Kicking and Screaming and the voice that comes out of you said that you were a fighter in Thailand for 2 years, I was like, what? This guy doesn't sound like a super aggro asshole that just wants to murder people. Like, and I find that there is a section of these people that get into fighting and stuff that are actually not all the cliches that we see, that are always the villain in movies and stuff. But, I just really appreciated that because you opened my eyes to the fact that there's all these other aspects to the world of fighting, and some of them are very important to people's life and mental health.
Like, yeah, that's really cool to hear. I would say in my experience, honestly, the kind of stereotypical like alpha male aggro dude is by far the exception rather than the rule. Because a funny thing that happens when you start learning how to fight is you learn pretty quickly that a lot of people are better at fighting than you. So everybody has to start in the same place essentially, and you might have some natural gift for it, but for the most part, when you walk into a gym for the first day, there's going to be, any number of people in that same room who are better than you at the thing that you're learning because they're teaching it. They've been doing it longer. They've done it professionally. So you lose a lot of that ego at the door pretty quickly because, you come in and you're like, oh yeah, I'm a real tough guy. And then you get rolled up or you spar with someone who makes it pretty clear that they can knock you out if they want to.
Mm.
And I think a lot of dudes that go into it with that attitude, the arc of realization for them is that like they no longer want to start fights. They don't go into bars and have that like alpha male attitude because they're like, I don't know what this guy knows. You know, this guy
Right.
might be a much better fighter than me because I've now experienced someone who does not look like they fight, but you know, I've trained with them and they're really strong. So yeah, I think that attitude is definitely more rare than you would expect it to be. Most people that you train with are going to be pretty chill and they're not going to have a huge ego. So it's pretty cool.
There you go. Well, thank you again. This has been super
Okay.
awesome.
Thank you, Kapun Kap. That's Thai for thank you. They say
Oh,
it a lot
okay.
in the movie.
Oh, they do. They just say a lot of things. As always, I'm Dirk Marshall, forever in your corner, and thank you for listening to VH Us.